Hi, everybody. We're here today with Father Andrew, raise your hand, and Father Bob from St. Laurence Parish in Elgin, Illinois, and we're doing a session of Ask the Priest. And before we get started and before it gets too late and all wired up, we want to let Boris have a say. So,
the clerical pop.
Yeah. So, everybody wave at Boris. Everybody wave at Boris. Boris!
As you know, Boris celebrated his 1-year birthday, and he wants to thank all his parish dog friends for their good wishes, and he was very excited to see them all. Thank you. As you can see, he's very excited to get down.
All right, so hi everybody. Let's just start out a little bit and say, why did you become a priest? So who wants to start?
Well, at first I would say I don't know that I wanted to become a priest, but it was made evidently clear to me that that's what God wanted me to do, or I felt He was calling me to it. And after a number of different events in my life, I recognized that He was making it very clear to me. You might ask how that would be a 3-hour session, so we don't have that much time, but through various things that happened in my life, I became very convinced that it was the best thing that I could do with the life that God gave me. I also came to realize more and more that it ultimately would lead to my own happiness and my fulfillment. So for me, it ended up being a win-win that I followed His call to the priesthood.
Cool. Father Bob.
Well, my sisters remind me that when I was 3 years old, I was cutting up hosts with a little glass and slices of bread, smashing them so they would look like hosts, and forcing my family to be the clergy, the congregation, and we'd have mass. I don't remember that, but when my day of ordination, another woman came up who was a friend of the family, and she says, "Bobby, I remember when you did this." And so I guess there was something there at the beginning. For so long, I wanted to be at least finding out what was going on, but I never had the opportunity. I went to the vocation director when I was in high school, and there was nothing there. So I never thought that there was anybody, there was no situation where I could be a priest because I never saw any brown hands at the altar. So finally, an associate pastor over at St. Joe's, who is now a Monsignor, he said, "Have you ever thought about it?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, think about it more." So I went back the next day and said, "Well, next week." And I said, "Yeah, I've thought about it." And I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, get ready." And the next week I was at the seminary filling in the applications. That was in Baltimore. I had thought about things for many years, about the service point of it, because I saw people around me who were doing the same thing. We had the Jesuits who were living at our house, who were doing the ministry that I thought, well, I could. My father was a compassionate man who served the people in other ways, and I said, oh, I can do that. And I was working with the War on Poverty at that time, and I was serving the people's needs in many different ways. So that kind of was a conjunction of all the service things that I thought maybe I could do. So at that time, I think the Lord was telling me, this is for you. There is a place for you. And so I went to seminary. On my ordination day, I think that there was so many people there. The bishop kept telling me, you know, Robert, if you have your ordination at the cathedral, we usually have the cathedral full for celebrations. I said, you don't have to worry, Bishop. Only my family will just fill it. And so when we came in procession, the bishop said, well, I'll be damned. The church was packed. And it was from people from all over the diocese. And there was a joy there. And that really animated me to say, to understand that this was where I should be. And so there's a lot of things that have happened in my 41 years, but there still is a place for me, I think.
There is. There definitely is a place for you here, especially everybody loves both of you. Okay, so Father Bob, I got the camera on you.
Okay.
Tell me about your family. How many brothers and sisters? Anybody else in the ministries? Blah, 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 blah.
Well, I have 2 sisters and a brother. My sister Mary, Lupi, a lot of people in the country know her. And she likes to be social, and she's involved with a lot of things. And my sister Dolores is a very quiet one. Dolores is married. Lupi is not married. Dolores has 3 children and grandchildren. And my brother is married, my brother Mike, and he has 3 kids, and they're all over the country too. So they're grandparents, and sometimes we see them, sometimes we don't. Many times we don't. But we have been a very close family. We communicate constantly, even if we don't see each other. And we have an extended family here, which is fantastic. We have over 200 descendants from my mother's side of the family here in Elgin, and another 200 in Denver area, and another 200 in California. So all on my mother's side.
So they were like Abraham and propagated the earth?
Yes, right. And we communicate with them too.
So did you grow up here?
Yes, I was born here and grew up here in Elgin. And the only time I left was at seminary, and when I went to study different places. And I did go to Spain and Portugal and the Bahamas too. So.
All right, so Father Andrew, it's your turn. Tell us about your family.
So I was born and raised in Rockford, Illinois. I'm of a family of 5 children. Currently my mom and my dad are still living. They're living in Rockford. I have 3 brothers and 1 sister. And they are all married except for my oldest brother, Father Timothy. He's a priest. He's the pastor at Our Lady Good Counsel in Aurora. And he and I entered a religious congregation out of college, and we eventually found our way back here to the diocese. I remember when we left for the religious congregation, my parents said, "We think it's great that you're becoming a priest, but can't you be a priest in your own diocese?" And at the time we didn't know it, but God would eventually bring us back here, and we're very happy to be here around our parents and the rest of our siblings. My brother Peter is married. He works in Chicago. He's an actuary. My brother David works in Chicago. He's working with the Chicago Tribune. And my sister lives in Madison with her husband. So all 3 are married. I have, I think, 9 nieces and nephews.
It's hard to keep track.
9 or 7, I don't know. But it was a great honor to discover my priestly calling in conjunction with my brother. I kind of followed him into the priesthood. He followed me into the diocese. But it's a wonderful thing, a special thing to have a sibling as the difficulties sometimes of the priesthood. And I was always edified to see him going forward in his spiritual formation, which motivated me to do that as well. So I consider myself very blessed to be privileged, actually, of having the family that I have.
You've got a degree in forestry? What's your degree in?
My degree is in forestry. I went into forestry for a number of reasons. I love the outdoors, although I don't really spend a whole lot of time now outdoors. But so I went to northern Michigan, the Upper Peninsula, studied up there. The other thing is I loved to ski at the time. They had their own ski hill. And it was probably more out of recreational interest than realizing that I would end up with a job afterwards. It was kind of hard to come by a job. I went into scientific research, aspect of forestry, crop improvement, genetic engineering. That was interesting. I remember I was in grad school getting my master's degree in that, and I told my professor, my managing professor, that I was going to enter the seminary, and he said, well, I can't believe you're going to waste your life on the priesthood. And I thought, well, I think God has a different plan for me, and I don't consider that I've wasted my life. Whether it be as a priest or even in my university life, I loved studying the sciences. I was especially thrilled that when I entered the seminary, I entered the world of philosophy and theology. I consider that my education is very well-rounded, and I think it gives me a unique perspective.
Yeah. So,
Just one more thing about that. He has continued with his love of forestry. This year he planted at least, I think, 40 or 50 plants of forsythia, and we're going to create a barrier there. And he's always had a garden here, so he's still planting carrots and everything.
So we do have a question from one of our listeners. Erica is asking, well, actually her husband is asking, he wants to know who's doing the lawn maintenance for the parish.
Right now, no one. It's still somewhat dormant, although it's starting to grow pretty good. Our front lawn at the rectory is maybe within a few weeks of needing to be mowed. Normally I do my rectory lawn, and I have a parishioner who helps me out with the parish property.
I saw you out playing Forrest Gump on the tractor doing the sidewalks when it was snowing.
I love to plow. At least for the past 2 winters I've done it. Who knows, maybe the next one or future ones I might get tired of it, but always grateful when parishioners want to step up and help. You know, Wes Pierce helps with the lawn. Mark Driscoll helps with the plowing. I think he loves to plow as well, but anything parishioners can do to help us. There's a lot of things that need to be done. It'd be great to have a spring clean.
That's a commercial,
So there's a lot of things that can be done, and everybody's welcome.
Yeah, if you're willing to help.
Yes.
There's lots of stuff to do. All right, so let's move on with some other questions. And by the way, if there's anybody that has a question, you just have to type it into the chat here, and we'll ask it if it's appropriate. So make sure your questions are appropriate. All right, what's your favorite liturgical holiday?
Mine is Advent, all of Advent, because in Advent we're anticipating Christmas, preparing. Our society prepares in so many different ways than we do, but we prepare internally. But also there are celebrations of the Blessed Mother there. The two celebrations that we have, the one that I've been very involved with for most of my life is Guadalupe, and having the novena and preparing all the songs and the dances and all kinds of things that have to do with the celebration for Our Lady of Guadalupe. It just fits because she comes as a pregnant woman, and she's anticipating the birth of her son. And this is what we're celebrating at Christmas, the birth of her son. And so it really is, for me, exciting to be in that anticipatory tradition of Advent.
Show us a little bit of that dance.
Not right now.
Actually, Father Bob has been dancing since, I don't know, grade school. He was
3 years old.
Yeah,
Okay.
he was in one of the folk dancing groups here in Elgin that his family was very heavily involved in.
My sister and I had a dance group before I went to seminary. We had 40 kids, and they were not just Mexicans, but we had Puerto Ricans and Cubans and everybody involved. And we did programs for not just this area, but in Rockford and Aurora and Waukegan. We danced all over the place.
Wow.
So,
Is that dance troupe still in existence?
no. it's
Who's the
not.
group that came for our couple of celebrations that we did?
That group is one of the groups that was started here in Elgin. I'm not sure what the name of it is, but
Okay.
I'm not sure
There-
their name either.
there are 5 different groups now in Elgin.
All right.
So-
Wow. So Father A, what's your?
I don't know. That was kind of a hard question. I would say maybe Ash Wednesday.
You're gonna have to explain that one.
Usually by that time every year, I know I need to do some soul searching and repenting and spiritual exercise. So it's kind of a good excuse for me to do that. So probably
Okay.
that.
All right. Very good. Okay, so now we did have a question. This is an actual, let's get down to the process here. When does the host actually become consecrated? When does that actually happen?
So in any sacrament, you need basically 2 things for the sacrament to work or to be affected, and that is the matter and the form. So you need the matter, something physical happening, and then you need the words of the priest or the minister who performs it. So when the priest says the words of consecration in the Mass, whether it be with the host or the body or the blood, that's when the consecration takes place. So, in other words, this is my body which will be given up for you. Those are the words of consecration. And when those are pronounced, then the sacrament is effective.
And you told me it's basically when you hold your hands over. No.
Well, in that part of the Mass, which happens right before the consecration, that's called the epiclesis, which means the priest is inviting the Holy Spirit to come down. And so that is a little bit preceding the actual consecration, which are the words or the host or the wine.
All right. And then tell me, because since I've been doing it lately, why do we ring the bells?
That was a tradition that began when the Mass was celebrated with the priest facing the wall with his back to the congregation. Many people were saying that they were praying their private prayers and doing all kinds of other prayers and not really focusing on what was going on at the altar because everything was in Latin. And so when the bells were rung, it was a way of saying, this is a special time. This is the time you should focus on what's going on at the altar, the consecration.
That's good. It's good to know.
And I would say that that is still applicable, even though the priest is facing the people. People are still often distracted, and this kind of brings their attention to the essential point of the Mass.
Yeah. All right, so we've got some questions that people have typed in. Who's cutting your hair these days? So, and Bill Sarto asked the question. He says, no, I can't cut hair. So.
Well, for myself, I don't really publicize this, but I cut my own hair, so it's been no problem for me.
You do a good job if you cut your own hair. Congrats.
When I was in the seminary, we all had different jobs. Mine was barber, so I just started cutting my own hair.
When I was in seminary, I cut the gents' hair. That was the professor's hair. I never got paid for it, but anyway. But I just trimmed my own hair. I have a barber though, who's the president of South Elgin, so he's a good man.
And he knows better than to mess it up, right?
Right.
All right. Okay, so now we have another question. It's from Erica Gomez. Do you think we could be doing the live stream masses better? And what is the difference of an extraordinary mass?
Well, I'm very pleased the way our live stream masses have been going. Without the help of Dee and others, I don't know that I would have got it off the ground. So I'm very grateful for her help and the others who have been helping me, the musicians, the readers that have been coming in. I know there are many more people of the parish who would like to help, and most unfortunately, I've personally restricted it to a small team because I think that best represents the wishes of the civil authorities and our bishop with regard to coronavirus lockdown. But the other thing I would say is in this special circumstance, it's helpful, it's good. So many of you have notified us and thanked us for this opportunity to continue to follow Mass live streaming. However, I would say our faith is a sacramental one. It's not a virtual one. So what do I mean by that? What I mean is the physical presence is so important to us, so important to our faith. And it can never be a substitute for the actual real presence of the people here in Mass. And so although I'm very glad we're able to do this in this time, I think like all of you, Father Bob and I are really anxious for this to end because we miss your presence here. Not only that, but I'm sure you miss receiving the body and blood of Jesus Christ. So I think we're doing a good job. I'm pleased. I don't know, maybe all of you, if you think there's one or two things that we can improve, and why not? You know, we can always improve. Send us your comments.
Do you have anything that you'd like to add to that?
No, I think that's what you and Belinda are doing to help Father and I it's immeasurable. And our deacons and the people who have supported us with the music. It's what we can do. Without the congregation, there's always something missing without the congregation. It seems empty, but with what we can do here at the altar, it can give support to other people and gives us support too.
Good. Okay, so now I don't know who's been in communication with, but we do have a question from Josie Castro, and she says, "I'm glad to see y'all. Do you know how Mr. Cantu and the teachers are doing?"
I can answer that, and I can tell Josie's from Texas when she says y'all. Hi, Josie, how are you? We're all doing fine. The teachers are doing well. Mr. Cantu's doing fine. He's down in Texas. He got stranded down there. But really, when all the work is now being done virtually, it doesn't really matter to a certain extent that he's down there. I know he's anxious to come back. He calls every once in a while and fills me in on the communications that he's receiving from the diocese. We're still awaiting a possible date for the return of the students. I think the teachers are preparing a video for the students to watch. Hopefully our students can watch this. We miss you all. We miss your presence here on Wednesday morning. Hopefully you've been following the masses throughout the weeks, and we're praying that God keep you all safe.
We miss the passion that you were very involved with this year too, and hopefully we'll have the crowning of the Blessed Mother with the students too.
Is that May 1st normally?
Yes.
Okay. All right, and we've got another question from Erica Gomez. I hear more and more discussions about women becoming deacons. How do you feel about that?
That somehow passed through the, that question passed through the, what's the word I'm looking for? The screener. That's an unacceptable, no, I'm just kidding. It's a difficult question to answer in that it seems like one study is coming out after another. It's a complicated discussion on many levels. I think a number of people feel that women have not had a big enough role in our church. I think a number of people would agree with that. What that translates into or should translate into can be a debatable topic. There's basically now an investigation as to whether women were allowed to be deacons in the early part of the church, and if they were, was it a ministerial role? Was it a sacramental role? I will let those studies come out, and it will speak for itself. But the church, if it doesn't involve the women in important roles, I think we're the worse off for it. I don't know of anybody who would disagree with that. But we'll wait and see what the commission comes out with.
Do they have an idea about when? No.
Well, they had one study that was made. It was completed and delivered to the Holy Father. Then you had the Amazon Synod happen. One of the conclusions of that synod was to organize another study. I don't know how many studies we need, but we'll see.
All right.
One of the things that people have come to me about saying, well, the Episcopal Church has deaconesses, but the role of the deaconess in other churches would be different from what a deacon is in our parish, in our church. So we would have to, as Father said, decide if it was a sacramental position, liturgical position, or a service position, whatever comes out of those discussions. But I think that the women have always been involved in the church, and not just in cleaning. So the women, I think, without women, our parish would not really function so well. So.
Oh, you just got all kinds of hearts floating up out of that.
One thing that I would say there too is from my understanding, women have never been a part of ministerial ordination of holy orders. So that's never happened in our church to this point. I don't know if it will in the future. Some of the positions in the early church, when they speak of deaconesses, are more in line with, from what I understood, of when people were being baptized back then. Many adults were being baptized. There would be women who would be assigned to help the catechumens go into the font, that type of thing, but it was never considered ministerial. I would also say that I think one of the tragic losses that we've had in our church recently is fewer and fewer women religious. I remember with a lot of devotion the nuns that taught me in school, and I really lament the fact that young people nowadays really don't have much contact with nuns, don't know what a nun is. Probably the only idea of religious life for women that they see is on Hollywood movies, which is quite often very shallow and fake. So I think that would be one thing that I would hope to come into resurgence is young women listening to the call to become a sister in consecrated life.
I remember my mother was a director of nursing service at a Catholic hospital, and the nuns all wore the big long gowns, and they had the big winged habits. I think they were the Sisters of Charity. Sisters of Charity, and Daughters of Charity. That's exactly it. And they would walk around the hospital, and you'd think that they were just going to take off and go flying. But now nuns, I remember Sister Janice when I converted. Sister Janice didn't really wear a habit. She wore her cross, and so being a nun nowadays wouldn't be as awkward maybe as trying to put all that stuff on.
It depends on the religious orders.
Well, that's true.
Some religious orders still have the full habit. Some have modified habits, and some have just street clothes.
Right.
So it depends on the religious order and the ministry that they do.
Right.
Many of them are in teaching, some are in nursing, different things that they do. So it's up to the religious order to do.
So we have another question from Natalie Cecilia. I think I pronounced that properly. Is it really bad to hold hands with family members at church during the Our Father? Someone once told me it was imitating the priest.
Is it bad? I wouldn't use that term bad. It's certainly not following the rubrics of the Mass. What you're referring to is the orans position. That's what it's called. Orans in Latin means praying. The praying position in the Our Father. The priest is the only one who is to assume that position. I see some of our parishioners doing it. I do not stop them. I do not say it's evil. So I wouldn't use the term bad, but it's certainly not called for by the rubrics of the Mass, which I personally believe I tried to follow the rubrics. And sometimes I'm not aware of all of them as I should be. It has happened that a parishioner has mentioned to me, Father, you're not following the rubrics. I looked them up and I said, you're right. And I tried to follow them. So that's the answer to that question.
So, but if they want to hold hands, like with each other, that's fine.
Sure.
All right.
The diocese said it's not appropriate, but for anybody to hold hands.
Really?
Yeah, but if your family, you know.
But was that because of COVID, or was that just
No,
in general?
It was said before that too. But what people do in private prayer is another thing. Some people who are in the charismatic movement have they raise their hands and pray in different ways. But when it's at the Mass or other liturgical celebrations, it's different. But people bring that personal stance, I guess you'd call it, into the Mass sometimes.
Okay, so now we have a question. It's kind of for me. And it says, is there a way we could the live streams could be filmed horizontally? And who just asked that? Natalie asked that, and we tested that the other day, and I have it on the Facebook in the videos. It sits at a 90-degree position, so Facebook doesn't really want us to live stream horizontally. So we tried it and we posted it just so that you guys could see what happens if we do that. Erica says she would like to have more Latin in our masses. So I know I was confused the other day because Father Bob was singing something in Spanish and it sounded like Latin to me, but it's awfully close together, so we'll take that. Tony Kamisic is asking, will you please say the spiritual communion prayer right after communion? Is that something that you guys can do?
I think that's a personal thing, isn't it?
There are many different spiritual communion prayers. I suppose we could find one, just as I say the St. Laurence prayer. We could find one and pray it. But I kind of agree with Father Bob that it might be a more apt thing to, and here I'm speaking to myself, maybe I should allow a little bit more time for you to say your personal spiritual communion prayers and before I close with the final prayer. But if there's interest, we can look for one and we could say one, sure.
Did you want to say something?
I just said there's some in the back of the missalette too.
Okay. And we have just today or yesterday, did we put out missalettes by the north door for the new period? I thought.
Not to my knowledge yet, but we can certainly do that, sure.
All right. And then another question for me, is there any way the live stream Sunday Masses could be posted on YouTube after? I do post them. I try to get them up right away as soon as I get home, but I am still working, and so it takes me a little bit of time to get some things posted because I have to do all the conversions, but I do try to get them up as soon as possible, and they are on our YouTube channel. If you can't find the YouTube channel, we have sent it out in a flock note, and it is linked on our website. Okay, John Brooks is asking if either of you know how Father Joe is doing.
I spoke to Rob Laird, who was a very good friend of his, about 4 days ago, and he said that he's doing very well. He's okay at home, but he's climbing the walls just like everybody else.
Oh yeah.
And not too many people were going to help him out because he doesn't drive anymore. The only way he would get out was if someone would take him out. But now he's inside and nobody's gone to see him. But there is communication with him. And Rob said he's doing pretty well.
Good. Bill Sarto asks also, Father Andrew, have you been doing any fishing during the shutdown?
No, I haven't.
He's been doing baking.
I've been doing baking, yeah. So a little bit of that, a little bit of maybe gardening, a little bit of fixing things around the house, a little bit of cleaning my junky offices. That's about it.
What about you, Father Bob? What have you been doing during the shutdown?
Well, just sometimes climbing walls. I've had, fortunately or unfortunately, I've been called to do a lot of burials, several burials. And it's tragic to see that families can't come together to support one another or even be there at the burials because of the restrictions. And it just really hurts your heart to see somebody who was very open and very positive in life, having no one there to be at his burial or her burial. So it's tragic, but it's something that I'm honored to do too.
Okay, Natalie Cecilia asked, there is a difference between nuns and sisters, correct?
Yes.
So the difference is kind of like the difference between an order or a community like Father Andrew was in and...
I would say no. To my knowledge, I don't know the difference.
Nuns are the ones that are in cloisters and religious orders like that. Sisters, from what I understand, and I was told this by some sisters, that they weren't nuns, they were sisters. They were out in the community serving the community. They were not in a monastery or a convent closed up.
All right. So Natalie, Google that, okay? And let us know.
All right.
Eleanor Jen Casala White. Eleanor, that's a mouthful of a name. Why do some people touch their heart when the bells chime during the Eucharistic prayers?
I am unaware that they do that at that particular time. I know there are other instances where we do
Mea culpa.
the chest thumping, which is in the mea culpa, or in the act of contrition, where you say my sin, my grievous sin. So, you know, that is a sign of remorse or
Humility too.
humility.
When we have the prayer, the Eucharistic prayer number 1,
Yeah.
the priest will do that. Your unworthy servant, and he beats his breast there.
So I think that kind of speaks to other types of physical gestures that we have, and I think those are important and they're for a purpose. Some people, if they wanted to criticize, would say, well, that's false piety, it's making a show. But I think the wisdom of the church is cognizant of the fact that when we do something exteriorly with gestures, it helps us put ourselves in the right frame of mind. For example, when we come into church and we genuflect, we go down on our knees, we do that as a sign of reverence. Even that, of course, can become formalistic, it can become empty if we're not or knowing of what we're doing. But anytime we do something physically, it helps put us in the right frame of mind. So it's meant to be a help to us.
So me not being a cradle Catholic, I learned a lot of things. So the crossing of your forehead, your lips, and your heart is to signify in my mind, on my lips, and in my heart. And we do that at the gospel because you want those words to come into those parts of your body. Did I got that right?
Yeah, you did.
Woohoo! All right.
Who taught you your catechism? Who brought you into the church?
Father Joe
Okay.
and Sister Janice
Okay.
were my teachers.
Wonderful.
So, but there are still some things that I see people doing, and I think it depends on where they went to school, when they were coming up through Catholic school. I think it all makes a difference as to which Vatican convention they were part of and all that different kinds of stuff. Okay, we've got another question. Natalie's been busy typing. How do you feel about, especially young adults, Catholics correcting each other on seemingly minor things? I find it difficult to hear, and sometimes it makes me feel like I'm not doing anything right. Natalie, do you mean during Mass? I'm going to scroll to the bottom real quick. Oh, Natalie Kessel. Okay, it's Natalie Kessel, not. So Natalie, what did you mean by that?
Well, I could address something if she's going to clarify her question, but
All right.
I think whenever we see somebody doing something that either we don't do or we think they might be doing incorrectly, I think it's always important to try to be an effective witness to the truth. I think we need to say the truth, but in charity.
Paternal correction.
And I think as well, sometimes we have to be aware that we might think we know what is right, and we become very dogmatic and pontificate to other people, you're doing that wrong, even when they themselves might not be correct themselves. So first of all, we have to make sure that we know what we're talking about. And secondly, to do it in charity. And then third, on the part of the recipient, I think it's always important to be humble and recognize we can be doing something wrong. And I think a lot of people are very defensive nowadays. They're hesitant to take anybody's correction or advice. And I think we have to simply understand that I might be doing something wrong, and if somebody brings it up to me, to listen to them, to try to find the truth of what they're saying. Who knows, they might even say something with a bad intention, but what they're saying is true. And sometimes when that happens, we focus on the bad intention of the person without looking at the truth of what they're saying. So I think on all sides we have to be humble and try to do what is right and what is just.
Belinda posted that the missalettes are out of the front door. So if anybody wants to come by church, there is a box of them by the north door. That's the one where the school parking lot is. You can pick up a missalette, and then you can follow along during Mass as we are doing Mass live stream. Deborah Wingren says, I think the live stream Masses are absolutely wonderful. We thank you, St. Lawrence, and for what you all are doing. God bless you, Father Andrew and Father Bob, as well as the staff. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, Natalie also wants to know, do you have any more pictures of how the church looked historically? I love to see those. I got a couple on the website, but are there more hiding around somewhere?
There are, in the archives, which unfortunately really aren't too well organized. That's a huge project, and probably a project for
It's a
a
shelter in
perfect
place
time.
project.
Yeah, a time like this is to work on the archive. We do have old pictures. I've seen the church through its various stages, and you know, it's quite interesting to see how it's evolved over the years.
Yeah. Dee Glukowski, I'm sorry if I butchered that. I just want to thank you both for everything. I do appreciate it. Natalie was asking about the holding the hands in church. So you mentioned a rubric. Is there somewhere that we could look at that? Or is that a secret priest thing?
No, actually the laity don't really, for the most part, have access to that. They can, but because we use missalettes, the missalettes take all those out for the most part. Otherwise, it'd be, you know, unwieldingly thick. But if you look at any missal, some of you might have missals, hand missals. They still sell them. Rubrics are what's written in red. So you'll hear the saying, read the black and do the red. And what that means is, you know, we should follow what's being told us to do in the red and say the words that are in black. So can you get a hold of them? Yes. I don't know, you might Google it. I don't know if it's online. Everything's online. You might find them there. But, you know, there's another document called the GIRM, G-I-R-M, General Instruction of the Roman Missal. If you really want to get into the weeds of what should be done and shouldn't be done, you can look that up as well. That's probably also online.
So tell me the prayer that you say as you're washing your hands. When the altar server pours the holy water over your hands.
Go wash away by iniquity, cleanse me from all my sins.
And are there any other prayers that you say, because I see sometimes, I sit up front, so I see you guys doing some other things. Are those one of those do the red things, or is that one of the do the black things?
It's both. It's doing and saying. So there are specific words that need to be said and doing specific actions. So yes, there are other times where the priest says what they call sotto voce, under, you know, whispering. He says certain prayers during the Mass. Without them in front of me, it's hard for me to remember what some of them are, but for example, when the priest puts a drop of water into the wine, he says a certain prayer, recalling that Christ was both human and divine. Through the mystery of this water and wine, may we come to share the divinity of Christ, who humbled himself to share in our humanity. So there are particular prayers that the priest will say.
We did a series in the bulletin, maybe a year and a half ago, that Linda, I can't remember her last name, she had found them and we broke them down and put them in the bulletins. I was thinking maybe we should rerun that series again. That would be a good thing, because Arcelia Rivas said, "Good morning, Father Andrew, Father Bob. Is there a way you can do something special for the kids? Now that we've been watching the Mass on Facebook, my daughter Daniela has a lot of questions about the rituals of Mass."
That would be a great idea. Maybe we could organize a Q&A for kids. That's a wonderful idea.
Yeah.
So we'll let you know when that will be scheduled.
We'll schedule it on Facebook and let everybody know. We'll pick a time. And just to let me know, for the kids, do you think it would be better if it was late afternoon or evening? So give us some feedback on what you think might be a good idea for doing something for the kids. Wendy Stencilman says, what can church do to bring people back to the Catholic faith? So many people are against organized religion. Any ideas? Should we do a study on it?
I think that if people really understood what the Catholic Church is, they would not be so defensive or fearful of being a part of it. Many people, and I've had so many people in my ministry who have left the church, and it pains me to see that, because they don't really understand what they're leaving. In other churches, the sacraments. There was one, when I was in Cary, this couple were very involved in the parish, and they had a young child, young girl, and she was getting ready for First Communion, and they decided to leave and go to a mega church. And it hurt me to see them afterward in the grocery store, realizing that this young girl would never receive Holy Communion. And it was painful. They really don't, many people don't understand what the church has, the treasure the church has, and what they're leaving. If we understood, I think that people, if we communicated better, I think, what the church has, the treasures the church has, people would really understand it and stay.
I would agree with that. I would also encourage those who are leaving, or those who have questions or doubts, to really, and I know this might require a certain amount of courage and bravery, but to really open up to your priest. Tell him what's going on. Tell him your questions. Tell him your doubts. Ask him for answers to those things that are really troubling you. I would challenge people to do that. I'd be overjoyed that more people came and did that with me. I don't feel attacked. I don't feel the need to be defensive. I will do my best to give you the answers that you're looking for. And I think so often, people's feelings get hurt, and they're afraid to say what is deep down in their hearts. But I know in my own case, whenever I've had a difficulty with the faith or my belief, it's only helped me to vocalize it to somebody who might be able to help me.
Also, I think that people keep so much in themselves, and there's situations that happen maybe with a priest. They didn't understand, or they didn't do things the way the person wanted it to be done, and they're hurt, and they just leave. The church is more than the priest. The church is more than the people. It has to be everybody. We are the church.
All right. We've been going at this for an hour now.
Yeah,
I
amazing.
think this is something that we should continue, if it's okay with the fathers. Let me read just a couple of other comments here. Whoa, they just all moved. Erica Gomez suggested maybe once a month for STL students, St. Lawrence students. Sharon Slavicek said, thank you, Father Andrew and Father Bob, for the live stream masses. I may have moved away, but my heart is still with St. Lawrence.
Hi, Sharon.
Kathy Schull says third grade is currently studying parts of the Mass. That just gave me a brilliant idea. Why don't we have the third graders write something for the bulletin? That would be really good. So Kathy, can you organize that for me and get in touch with me? Messalina China, do we know, did I say that right? Mm-hmm. Can you do a Bible study class? We could potentially organize something on Zoom. I do have a Zoom account that I would loan you guys if you wanted to do something with that. Erica Gomez says, yes, Father B, the Catholic faith is a beautiful religion and a hidden treasure. Wendy Mann says, I bring my faith to the bedside with my patients. It has helped me and them at those times when they are at their worst. So thank you, Wendy, for doing that. Natalie said, very well said, Father Bob, probably about when you were talking about Catholic and what you can do to bring it back. Lorena Arceo says, is there a way you could do something special? Oh, we just said that. Once a week in the afternoons for the kids. So let's talk about that. Wendy also says, thank you for the masses as well. It was a great help during Holy Week. And Sharon Slavacek says, hi, Father Andrew, need a hug when social distances goes away. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Dee Reinhardt. I help with the website and our social media and with our live stream masses that we've been going on through. If you want to send any information or any questions, when we do this next, we'll gather up questions. And of course, you are always welcome to type something into the chat. Any last words from either one of you?
Pray for your priests.
Stay holy and healthy.
Right.
All right. God bless everybody.